Folks, welcome back to the PlayAction Podcast. I'm your host, Christian McCullum. We have our very first repeat guest, Chris Buchignani from the Obligatory PSU Pod. Also does some stuff for The Blogy. Came on with us previewing game one of the season and absolutely nailed the Penn State-Wisconsin prediction. Had Penn State winning a tight one, maybe low scoring. Exactly what happened. Chris, thanks a lot for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
All right. You guys have the primetime game this week. It's the big game. It's the whiteout game, all that stuff. First of all, though, what were your thoughts? Like I said, the Wisconsin game played out kind of the way you guessed it might. It seemed like you guys took care of business against Ball State, but it might not have been the cleanest performance from your guys' end. What were your thoughts on Nittany Lions week 1 and 2?
Well, so the first thing I'll say about week 1 is that I think all of us were impressed and surprised at how well the defense played. You know, I felt like Penn State was going to be able to win that game by hitting on some big plays, which they did. And I thought the defense would play well enough to keep them in it, but I don't think any of us were expecting the performance at all three levels that we got. You know, Arnold Ebiketie was the transfer from Temple, who has been a big breakout player for Penn State over 2 games, blocked a field goal in that Wisconsin game, was all over the field as a pass rusher. He was everything he was advertised to be. There were some concerns coming in because the linebacker play had not been great last season. Well, nothing was great last season for Penn State, especially through the 0-5 start. But we're linebacker U. It's a pretty high standard. And all three of the guys elevated their games from last year, especially our middle linebacker, Ellis Brooks, really playing well. We needed him to step up as a senior and be a leader, and he's delivered big time. And, of course, we knew the secondary was going to be great, and it's been as advertised. So I think for all of us, the defense being better and more consistent and just, frankly, nastier. Something we have missed the last several years at Penn State is if you're a longtime fan, you're used to seeing physical, aggressive defense that's just got a nasty streak. It's still 2 games into the season, but I'm feeling pretty good that that's maybe back. And then when we look at what they did against Ball State last week, yeah, there were still some miscues, but also some signs of progress in terms of offensive execution from week 1 to week 2. And when you consider the 1-2 punch of coming off the big emotional road win at Wisconsin to start the season, and then the surge of, energy and excitement that comes with playing in front of the Beaver Stadium crowd for the first time. You have a lot of guys, 2 classes worth, who had not had that experience of running out of the tunnel and being in front of the fans. I thought the fact that they kept a relatively even keel throughout the game and executed very well, especially in the first half when we had all the starters playing, was actually pretty good. There was a little bit of concern, not that Penn State was going to get caught in a trap game situation, but just that they weren't going to have the emotional maturity to, come out relatively level and just execute consistently, and they did that. So whatever you can take from an opponent like Ball State, I think we exited week 2 feeling pretty good.
You talked about that energy and experience in Beaver Stadium, and you were commissioned to write a piece for The Blogy, about that, return to Beaver Stadium, and it had a lot of emotions in there. Obviously, Saturday was September 11th as well. If you're a Penn State fan, you probably read it already, but if you haven't, please check it out. That didn't turn out the way you thought it was going to, as when you first started thinking about the piece, did it?
It did not. I was expecting it to be just unilaterally upbeat and positive, and I don't want to say that, first of all, I think overall the piece was a positive piece. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say that it was a down day. There was a lot of really wonderful stuff. I watched somebody, it's the intro to our TV show this week, I watched a couple get engaged 2 tailgates down from me earlier in the day. So it was great. There was a lot of good stuff. I think it was just one of those moments where, I was in college during 9/11. And so to be in the stadium 20 years later, and they're doing the Blue Band did a tribute, and they had a military Black Hawk helicopter fly over before the game. And, just looking around the stadium and thinking about everything we've been through as a nation and as a people globally the last couple of years with the pandemic, all of it just kind of hit me at once. And it made me appreciative of the opportunity all of us who are lucky enough to be college football fans and be part of this awesome American ritual we are participating in. We're super lucky, but man, for Penn Staters and for everybody, it's been a rough ride so far in the 21st century. So just a little bit of a mixture of emotions, and I just wanted to write authentically what I was feeling. That's what they asked me to do, and that's what came out.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And like I mentioned, you guys have the Showtime game against Auburn Saturday night. It's the whiteout game, huge recruiting weekend. First of all, take me back. What's the genesis of the whiteout, and what's kind of been like over the years?
Okay, so the beginning of the whiteout was a marketing concept that came from a guy named Guido D'Elia, who was like the marketing guru of Penn State football in the early 2000s when the program was going through a prolonged period of kind of a rough go. 4 losing seasons in 5 years, which for Joe Paterno was just unbelievable. Prior to 2000, he'd had 1 losing season, which was 1988, and then you had to go back to 1938 before Penn State had another losing season. So to do it 4 times in 5 years was crazy. And so Guido had this idea that maybe you wanted to create more unity and a sense of belonging among the student section. So they debuted this concept in the 2004 Purdue game, which Penn State lost, but played well defensively and kind of stuck with the students. And so they did it again the following year when Penn State ended up having a huge resurgent season and winning the Big Ten when we played Ohio State in a game that was 16-6, big upset for Penn State in primetime. And so after that, the reputation of it just grew and grew. 2 years later against Notre Dame, they had the idea, let's do it in the whole stadium. And since then, it's just continued to gain more and more momentum and turned into what is now recognized as one of the best traditions in college football. It's a really special environment. It's cool to be able to be there.
And 22nd ranked Auburn Tigers will be there on Saturday night. Penn State favored by 6. This is the first time these teams have ever met in the regular season, right?
Yep. 1-1.
How do you see
2 bowl games?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so they're 1-1, and they're both bowl games.
Okay. How do you see this one playing out?
Well, it's interesting. The thing I think you've heard everyone saying, James Franklin even talked about it in his press conference this week, is that it's very difficult to get a read on Auburn, both how good they are and, what they're going to do philosophically on offense and defense, because you have the 1-2 punch of a new head coach coming in Harsin from Boise State, and the fact that they really just haven't played anybody. Now, you hear a lot of people say that about teams early on in the season, but truly, like, the level of crappiness on Auburn's first 2 opponents is really mind-blowing. So they, first week of the season, hung 60 points on on Akron, who then ended up getting their doors blown off by Temple the following week. And so Akron stinks, and Alabama State, the team they beat last week, is worse. So it's just very, very difficult to know what we're getting, other than to say I am relatively confident that they are going to look to run their offense through a 2-tailback system, Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter. Both underclassmen, both look like legit SEC backs. I think you're going to see, especially because if you can establish some kind of physical presence, it can take the crowd out of it. It can take the opposing defense out of it. Auburn will try to come out and run their offense through their running game, I suspect.
And how do you think Penn State's offense is going to fare against Auburn?
That's interesting. Again, we're installing this new offense. You saw some progress from week 1 to week 2. I think a big question is going to be how well can the interior of the offensive line play. State still hasn't quite figured that out after 2 games. They're continuing to shuffle some different players in and out, change assignments a little bit. And they've been susceptible, to some stunts and twists on the defensive line, just pretty simple stuff that our 3 interior linemen still aren't quite picking up. We have our starting center this year moved over from playing guard the last 2 years. And then, we've got some different players in new positions. I do think at the end of the day, Sean Clifford and his ability to make good decisions with the football, which was kind of his calling card through most of the 2019 season, when he led an 11-win campaign and was a problem for him big time through the first 5 games of last season, and then has since been cleaned up. Penn State has won 6 straight games going back to the end of the 2020 campaign. Clifford only has 1 interception. I think if he can continue to execute the offense, take what's given him. You talked about For The Blogy. They had a great film study on what Penn State did versus Ball State's defensive scheme and how Sean Clifford made the right decisions about what to do with the football. If he can keep doing that, I think the combination of that Penn State defense I talked about and the just slow, steady drip, drip, drip of all these different athletes they have at the skill positions, combined with the home field advantage environment, I think will be enough to put Penn State over the top. But I do not expect it to be a walk. I think it's going to be a challenging game.
Okay. Chris, thanks a lot. As I said before, please go check out his piece regarding the first home game at Penn State in a while at For The Blogy. Check out Obligatory PSU Pod. And Chris, where can I know the guys in the Northeast can see you guys on TV on Fridays. Where can they check you out?
Absolutely. So Friday nights and Saturday mornings, depending where you are, AT&T Sportsnet Pittsburgh, NBC Sports Philadelphia Plus, Nesson and Masson. You can check your local listings. ObligatoryPSU.com is the address to go check out. You get all listing information there. And again, to find the podcast, you just start typing the word obligatory into the search engine for any of the major platforms, and we'll pop right up.
Okay. All right, man. Well, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot, and good luck this weekend.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me back, man.